Happy Friday. It's so good to see everybody today for our weekly Move the Stairs Friday chat. We're going to be talking about some great stuff today regarding crisis, the difference between a crisis and an issue, and what's a real quick crisis plan that you can put together that's going to make all the difference for you when you work into a crisis. So thank you for joining us today. We're talking strategy behind some of our biggest public relations challenges. And today, as I said, we're talking about crisis and how you plan for a crisis and how you communicate during a crisis. So, Sarah, you want to talk about how we're going to break this down?
Absolutely. So as we do every week, we've got 4 topics. So at right at the top of the hour here, after our introductions, we're going to be talking about how you determine what's a crisis. Is it a crisis? Is it what we say is it a headache or a heart attack? And we'll get into that. At 15 minutes, you're going to hear about how to use the outline that's available by request. So we can send that out to you if you're interested. That uses our brand protection tool process to help walk through what are the steps for creating a crisis outline. And we're going to talk about how a crisis outline and a crisis plan are a little bit different. At 30 minutes, we're going to talk about how we use what we call our insider media relations expertise. And we're going to explain what that term means and how we use the expertise that all of 3 of us have, being from the news media, to help manage media relations during a crisis. Because I think that's the thing that probably scares the bejabbers out of people the most, which is, what do I do when, I pick up the phone and it's somebody from the media on the other end? Or even worse, what do I do if I open the front door and there they are? So that's what we're going to start talking about at 12:30. At 12:45, you guys, this is going to be fun. We talk about a go bag all the time. So we're going to show you some of the things that are in our go bags. We're going to talk about the sort of M&C go bag, and then we're going to talk about what's in our individual go bag. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. You can message us. You can leave a note on the Facebook Live page. You can get in contact with us later on if you're not seeing this live, and you can ask us questions, and we'll get to them next week because we're doing these every Friday afternoon at noon. So that's what we're talking about today.
Great. Jordan, how important is it for us to get questions?
It's pretty important because then we'll know exactly what you want to hear from us. And, we're going to be here for you every Friday. We do this every Friday at noon. So you can message us ahead of time because we're always going to tell you what's on schedule for next week as well. Or we can easily get back to you about what we're talking about this week too.
Great. So let's start real quick. One of our biggest mantras, actually our biggest mantra of all, is move the stairs. Very quickly, move the stairs means that you look at whatever situation you have within the parameters that you've got, and you be as creative as possible. So the quick story is I was covering a senatorial candidate who we knew was going to win, but getting him live at 10 o'clock when I was in news was key. And the stairs from the podium where he was going to give his acceptance speech led to my competition, not to my station. So I went and I undid the stairs and I moved them to my side. So many times in our lives, both at M&C, at the stations that I've worked in, we've used this theory of how can you look creatively at what you have to give you or your client the best opportunity to make the most of a situation, as opposed to whining. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, is what my kids always learned. And I think that's a great way to look at it. Get what you get, make the most of it. Really think about it. You'll come up with a great opportunity.
Like the PR MacGyver.
That's right. Be the MacGyver. And I can tell you that night we won. Not only did we have the candidate, but nobody realized I had moved the stairs. And so the other stations didn't get him for a good 20 minutes, which was fabulous. So that's move the stairs. We're going to move the stairs with PR. Each one of us at M&C tries to move the stairs in our own lives. So that's what it is. So Jordan, you want to talk a little bit about crisis versus an issue?
Yeah, no kidding. And, if you've watched some of our previous videos, we've kind of tiptoed around some of these different topics, but today we're really diving into, what's a crisis, what's an issue, what's in between, how do you determine between the two of them? Because a lot of times you're going to have something pop up that's an issue. And if you're
But it
not ready
feels like
for
a
it,
crisis at
that's
the
right. It
time.
may
Like a
feel like a
crisis.
crisis. And the
Exactly.
first thing you may do is panic. And that's the first thing you should not do is panic. So, Sarah, you alluded to it earlier, headache versus a heart attack. We all know if you have a heart attack, you call 911. If you have a headache, you take an aspirin, and hopefully you feel better a little later on. So what may be, maybe I'll toss this back to you, Sarah. Can you give us maybe an example of what may be a headache related issue and what is a full-blown crisis?
Sure. So it's going to feel like a crisis. If you are a business and somebody gets on your social media page and says, this business or this product is terrible and it's awful and I don't like it and it didn't work and, they're terrible people and they took my money. Like that's going to feel really personal, like an absolute crisis to you, whether you're a restaurant or whether you sell widgets, doesn't matter. What I would say is that even though it feels like a crisis, that's an issue. That's something where you need to take a little breather and step back and go, let's keep an eye on this. Let me see if some of my advocates, some of my other customers that really love me and love my product, come to my defense and say, actually, gosh, I've used this widget and boy, it works perfectly for this widget need that I have. So that's kind of one of those calculations you made. We define crisis as a significant threat to physical life or limb. Like if you see blood, it's a crisis. If you have something coming at you that may permanently damage your business, so my widget machine blows up, that's a crisis. So that's kind of how we help our clients walk through, is this something that you need to immediately respond to, or is this something that you could kind of take a moment, see how it's developing? And in a number of cases with clients, especially on social media, it was a situation where somebody was trying to create a crisis. They took a little ember and there were sort of naughty trolls on social media trying to fan it into flames. And we actually ended up just saying, you know what, if you ignore this, these naughty trolls have like 18 followers, hold your nerve, ignore it, and they will get bored and go away. And that's exactly what happened. Now, naughty trolls are different than an online mob. So again, that's one of those areas of differentiation that helps you understand. And it helps to have that external third party, ear to bend to say, is this a headache or is this a heart attack? And what should I do about this?
Sarah, I'd like to give another example too outside of social media. What if somebody dies on your property? Okay, somebody dies on your property to you and to your employees, that's a crisis. Mm-hmm. Depending on the circumstances of what happened, it may be an issue. So sometimes things that you would automatically throw into the crisis category are not crises from a PR standpoint. They may be a crisis from a personal standpoint to you
or even
to
HR.
People or your employees, that type of thing. But there is a difference between that and what is a crisis from a PR standpoint, and what in that situation either should or should not do, because sometimes preparing that it could blow into a PR crisis is very important, but basically not blowing it up yourself. And I have seen so many situations where people have actually gone out and blown it up themselves, instead of just quietly preparing and being ready, but waiting just a bit to see. So you don't want to have that shooting from the hip type of plan. You want to have something where you are thinking carefully. And again, I do think that that's where calling somebody outside who you trust and saying, this is what's going on. And I can't tell you the number of calls we've had like that over the years where our clients are thinking, this is like the worst thing ever. And we can say, this is a really awful thing. And this is a very sad thing. But from a media or a PR standpoint, depending on what's happening on social media, this is not a crisis from that standpoint. So it all depends on the perspective. So you want to try and look at it from the outside, because you don't want to overreact either, because then you can blow it into a crisis.
And I think you brought up a really good point, because you talked about how some people have allowed an issue to snowball into a crisis by putting it out there. That's really not a great tactic to go about things. That's why it's always good to kind of take that deep breath, step back, evaluate the situation, and really ask yourself, is this something that is going to get out of control, or can we manage this so that it doesn't get out of control?
I've also always found that if the crisis involves somebody else on the outside, if I can get on the phone or I can meet them personally and talk to them before they get on social media and just lambast whatever it is, that 9 times out of 10, we can find an answer that's not going to elevate this. So having a conversation, if it's somebody on the outside that you're having the crisis or the issue with, having a conversation with them, and not necessarily, I don't think I would do an email conversation. I would probably pick up the phone first, especially in the climate we're in right now, and try and get them on the phone as quickly as possible. Use a lot of humility, really listen to them, talk back to them what they're telling you, repeat back what they're telling you so that you truly understand what their issue is. A lot of times those were just misunderstandings, but in the social media world we live in, those misunderstandings can blow, or people may not have the whole story. And if you can explain what's going on from your side, that can make a huge difference.
And I think we talk about this every now and again. One really good technique, if you've got people, blowing up social media, is to try to move that conversation off social media as quickly as possible. But keep in mind that you're not just talking to that one person on social media. How you handle that response in public talks to all of the other people who follow your social media page or who may follow that person. So somebody may get on and say, this is the worst widget I've ever used and it's terrible and horrible, and I'm so disappointed. And so that's where a really thoughtful response publicly to say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, Mr. So-and-so, that you didn't like our widget. We'd be happy to help you get this sorted out and make sure that you're happy with your widget purchase. Will you please DM me, and so that we can have a direct conversation? And that shows to the outside world that you're responsive, that you want to make it right, that you care about customer service and happy customers. And it also then moves that conversation privately so that you don't do customer service in front of, 1 million people. That's not a great strategy.
And I think one of the things that we're known for is, well, we're known for getting people on air and getting coverage. We're known for not getting coverage. And I think one of the reasons that is because we really try to sit back and say, what is that other person's perspective? And that I have to take any defensiveness out of this conversation. I have to take defensiveness out of it. I can answer with facts, and I have to listen to my voice. If we're doing it on Zoom, I have to think about how I'm presenting myself. All these things make a huge difference. People have come at me over the different years over different things. The first thing to do is de-escalate the situation. That way you're keeping it an issue. It is not turning into a crisis. So that's something else to think about. Is there a way that you can keep this an issue, that you can address whatever their concerns are? And they may be completely wrong. That's okay. From their standpoint, they're completely right. And you need to understand that. So you need to acknowledge and honor them where they are and then move forward. And it's the same when you have a crisis in your business. You want to keep it an issue. It may feel like the worst crisis. It's one of those things where you're like, I work so hard. We get that. Absolutely. I'm a good person. We get that. Absolutely. But you got to take all of that out of the equation when you're dealing with someone who's already escalated, who's already angry, who's already emotionally involved. You've got to meet them where they are and bring down that, whatever that situation is, and then deal with whatever it is that you have to deal with. And 9 times out of 10, people want to be heard. People want to be heard. So if you can hear them and then you can help them, and it's not, I already have an answer and I'm just going to shoot it off. It's not one of those situations. If it's something that's escalating, you want to take care of that. So culturally, Sarah, you want to talk a little bit about our cultural situation right now between issue versus crisis?
Well, boy, howdy. That's one that is so at the beginning of the year, I don't think any of us thought that we were going to be dealing with the COVID crisis, and how that's affecting everybody's business. I don't think that anybody thought that we were going to be having such, society-wide cultural changes that businesses, or individuals may needed to have responded to. So, the benefit of having a crisis plan or even a crisis outline, just a flexible, like, how would we handle something, is that you've got kind of a roadmap and you've thought about, gosh, what are the things that might come at me? What are the things that are so outlandish, like COVID, that we might think about?
Or what's, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure.
Or what's in the news?
Mm-hmm.
Me Too was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for men of a certain age and women of a certain age, this was something that was just the norm. And so, unfortunately, when it didn't get to it, and let me say that it was the norm of how women were treated, not to the extreme, but that there was a cultural thing that went on there. So
Right.
Once Me Too came out, one of the first things I thought was, who of our clients do we need to have a conversation with regarding Me Too?
And we did, like, we actually did, I guess we would call this media training, but gentlemen, how do we stand in public for photographs? Right? Because I think gals can, get away with an arm on a shoulder or whatever. I'm not sure at this point, especially like if we're talking public figures, I'm not sure that gentlemen could. So one of the things that we did is we did a little bit of training on where do your hands go if you're doing a photo. And that was in response to something that was unheard of 10 years ago, completely not even thought of as remotely an issue 20 or 30 years ago. So that's a great example of, you have to look at the times, the prevailing winds, and just think, yeah, it might be time to update something ever so slightly. So, whereas you might have walked in the office and said, "Hey, girls, good morning," probably not a good way to greet all of the ladies in your office anymore.
Right, and it's one of those things where it becomes an issue in the media. You don't want it to become a crisis in your office or a crisis for your brand. So you need to start thinking about what's happening, and you have to really be on top of it. We had a situation where a person in power was asked for somebody to take a picture with him, and as the picture was being taken, it was after a long discussion. The person flipped up a sign that said "All Lives Matter."
Without asking him, without telling him.
Without asking him, without telling him, and also in the conversation and from where they were when that was happening, he didn't think about how that would impact the Black Lives Matter movement, because this is a new conversation, a newer conversation. I wouldn't say new, but a newer conversation that's much more highly charged right now, and it became a very significant issue. It never became a crisis, but it became a very significant issue. And it became an issue and didn't go into a crisis because immediately he started talking about what happened, how it happened, and that his understanding now of how that could be taken is completely different than it was. And we're going to talk more about that, the cultural issues versus crises next week, and really dive into that, because I think for so many people, this is a huge issue on how do you deal with it. What are you going to do or not do? You have to make those decisions, and how do you protect your brand by doing what you think is the right thing, and how will other people perceive that? So when we're talking about the difference between an issue and a crisis, we've got personal, life and limb. We've got business. Is it something that is going to significantly impact your ability to continue your business or to turn a profit? We could talk about gentrification in ink. We could talk about, there's all types of things there. And then culturally as well, what's an issue, what's a crisis, and how do you prepare, which kind of moves us into the importance of having a plan.
Right. And so I'm the producer here, and I'm going to keep us on time, because if we're going to get everything that we want to talk to, I'm going to have to move us forward here. So I just want to point out where we are in this move the stairs discussion. So we've talked about what's a crisis plan. Why do you need one? Right. We've talked about what is a crisis, how to define a headache versus a heart attack. And now we're going to talk about what is in a crisis plan outline. And like I said at the top, an outline is different than a full-blown plan. Maybe you could start there, Diane, and help everybody understand, how those two things are different.
Absolutely. So the outline is more of your roadmap for dealing with the unexpected. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to think about what's coming down the pike, and is it something that's going to happen in the next 6 months? Is it something that that if you put an outline together on it and you put the time and energy into it, your outcomes could be better. And then you're going to score all these things, and then you're going to come up with your probably top 3 to 5. And they're going to change. And gosh knows, things are changing dramatically, every month, if not every couple of weeks right now. So this may change. The outline really you talk about the important things of what you have to think about. And Jordan, do you want to go through those 5 things that we came up with?
Yeah, we'll jump in here with step 1. And that's, if you, God forbid, you have something happen and you are looking at a full-fledged crisis, but even if you're not dealing with a crisis, even if you're dealing with an issue, it's good to know who's going to be ready to make decisions, who's going to take the lead. And I think it's really important. We all have defined roles with the M&C. We know exactly what we're going to do if one of our clients have a crisis, but if your brand or your business has a crisis, who's going to take the lead? Who's going to make those decisions? And moreover, if you're out of town, who's going to back you up? That's really important and can very easily go overlooked. So do you have a leader? Do you have a team who's ready to respond? Are they media trained? That's kind of a big deal, especially if you are dealing with a full-fledged crisis, because what you put out there to the media, it can make or break your brand when you're trying to refill the trust bucket. And we talk a lot about the trust bucket here in the M&C. If you have a crisis, trust is lost. You don't want to continue to lose that trust by having somebody who's not necessarily media trained tackling a full-blown crisis.
Can I also add to that, Jordan, real quick, that you need to know who's going to lead that particular crisis. If you're in a bigger group, and there's someone who is an expert on that area, whether it's HR, whether it's investor relations, whether it's, production and delivery, who's going to lead that? But you need a second person, because my experience is that the person who's going to lead during a crisis is always gone during a crisis.
Always. So it does not fail.
No. So having that sub lead is what we call the sub lead. That second person who's ready to back up. Also, if your crisis goes for more than a day, need somebody who's going to be able to give the other person a break. Because I can tell you, after dealing with Columbine and just so many crises that were long and ongoing crises over weeks, burnout is a huge issue, and that's where huge mistakes are made.
Well, that's what happened to Tony Hayward, who was the CEO of BP, and he was very well media trained, and up until the point that he didn't do a good job, he did a fabulous job. Exactly. He was a wonderful spokesperson, and then it had been going for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and he was exhausted, and you could see it in his face, and he got frustrated, and he said, I want to make sure this is over, and I want to make everything right, and everything was going well in that interview. And then he said, nobody wants this over more than I do. I mean, I'd like to get my life back.
Right. And just to provide a little bit of background on that, Sarah's talking about the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And it was supposed to be a short-term thing, but ended up lasting a lot longer than certainly BP thought it would.
Yeah.
I can tell you from my own personal experience, I didn't go home for 3 days. when Columbine happened, and which is nothing compared to what other people went through. But the bottom line is, I had a interview on my third day, and it was a gotcha interview.
And you were news director at Channel 7 at the time, the ABC affiliate here in Denver.
Right. And they came after me hard, very hard, about the kind of coverage we did. And it was a very difficult interview. And while I'm thinking in my head, don't get defensive, I'm also thinking, damn it, I have done everything possible I can do. And once you get in that mindset, you are not performing at your top level.
No.
If somebody comes at you, and a reporter's, even if a reporter's asked, this was a gotcha, but the bottom line is, if it's a basic interview, you're still going to be defensive, like, why in the hell are you doing this? So if you're there, it's going to show in your face. Mm-hmm. You saw my face just go. It's going to show in your face. It's going to show in your body language, how you answer, the tone of your voice, all those things, and you just lost your credibility. That's the bottom line. So making sure that you can spell the person for a bit of time, that they get sleep, that they get to eat, that they're completely hydrated, that they're in a situation where they're not in the elements. All those things we learned over the years, and I can tell you that's how I wanted to make sure that my reporters who were on air, that they were physically taken care of, so that they could go for a week out in the elements, that there was a tent, that if it snowed, there was a heater, and if it was hot, there were fans, and there was water, and there was food, and that you took care of that person. That's huge, in order for them to be able to perform at the level that they need to perform at, especially in a pressure cooker situation.
So Mark Williams, you and I worked with Mark at Channel 7, made a wonderful comment. Oftentimes people think they have all the answers in place before they create a plan, before they have to have all the answers in place before they can create a plan. Wrong. Right. And I agree completely, Mark.
Yep. And Mark's a former news person. So
so he knows exactly what that pressure cooker's like. He says, as the Marine Corps says, bad plans carried out violently often lead to good results. Well, I'm certainly not advocating violence. The point is clear. Have a plan.
Have a plan. And this outline gives you flexibility. That's huge, to be flexible. And you're going to have to react to what's happening. So Mark makes a perfect point. It's kind of in our DNA as former news people, because that's the essence of your job, is to react to what's news. So but in 9/11, when I was in New York, I was reacting. I knew that I needed to get us off the island. I knew I needed to find a way off the island. I knew I needed that we may have to walk, so I needed water and I needed food. I knew I needed cash. Oh my God, I knew I needed cash. So I had the outline of what I needed. How that was going to happen and how I was going to react changed minute by minute. We were on our way to the Secaucus ferry to get over to New Jersey to hopefully get off the island, when we found out that that's where they were setting up the temporary morgue. And I have a little boy with me who's 7 years old, my son. The last thing they need is us there, if that's what they're doing, which obviously never needed to happen, but that's a whole other issue. But at that moment, we were walking out the door, we heard that report, we turned back into the door, and we made a new plan. That's the flexibility that I'm talking about, is that it was very clear that that ferry stop was not where we were going to go. We needed to go somewhere else. And I think that that's really important. So Mark, that's a really good point.
So Jordan, walk us through those other steps on the plan. And this, by the way, is a downloadable one sheet. So let us know if you need that one sheet and we will get it to you. But walk us through the rest of the steps for this outline.
Yeah, so we've determined who your lead is. We've determined who your sub-lead is, why that's important. So they're taken care of. What's your messaging? What is your crisis messaging? What are the key points that you're focused on? And part of the brand protection tool. Oh, go ahead.
And don't develop messaging in a crisis when you're sleep deprived. The whole idea here is you're thinking about what could I need and what can I draft up now that could just use a slight tweak depending on what the issue is at the moment. And then I get that approved. Does it need to go through legal, or does it need to go through CEO or whoever it is? And then that stuff is sitting there ready to go.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what you want to have. Part of this outline is getting the gears turning in your brain so that you can be prepared just in case you need to, or you're ready to recognize, and really everybody should have a full-fledged crisis plan, but pre-produced, whether it's a press release, we call those dark releases, that are ready to go. You can fill in the blanks and get them out there if they're approved through legal. Social media, what is your campaign if something happens? And what's the approval process to do so? Legal, I think, is a pretty big deal because that can take quite a long time. So I think being prepared for that moment, before that moment, is incredibly important. So step 2, always going to be, what's your crisis messaging? Moving right along to step 3.
Jordan, can I stop you real quick?
Sure, go for it.
If somebody's hurt, your crisis messaging always starts with an empathetic sentence. Something that we are so sorry for this, that this happened to this person. You're not taking any responsibility, but you're being human. Always. If somebody got hurt, always. That's the first thing. The second thing can be, here are the facts that we know. And the third thing is, these are our next steps. 3 types of messages in the release. Boom, you're done. Now, that doesn't ever, the reporters are going to want to know what happened and why it happened and who's at fault and how did you, okay, we understand that you want to know all that. This is what we've got and this is where we're going next. And then the fourth thing I would say is, and we're going to be back with answers to as many questions as we can get to in 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. So go ahead, Jordan, sorry.
Well, you do bring up the media, Diane, and that's right where I'm headed here with, the third step in this outline is you have to be planning for the media. And where are you going to stage them? If it's a big enough crisis, is there Wi-Fi? Do they have access to a bathroom? What's in the background? Is that something that could potentially further damage your business or brand? These are all things that kind of need to be front and center, and you really don't think about it until after a crisis happens. And, for one of our clients in particular, we have thought about this, and it's difficult. It really is kind of racks your brain a little bit, especially if you're in a really densely populated area, let's say. Where do you put people? How are you going to make yourself accessible so that your crisis messaging is getting out there to the right people in an appropriate amount of time?
And how, the media in a crisis situation are going to want to be in a place where they can see something that's relevant to the crisis. So whatever crisis you're thinking about at the time, think about where you can put them. Where would you rather have them than not have them?
Right.
If you have a place set up, you're going to have much more luck. They're still going to move around. They have freedom to move around on public streets, all of that. Absolutely. And we honor all of that. But if you have a place where your spokesperson's coming out, make sure that it makes sense from your standpoint, but you also want to put yourself in the shoes of the media, because now you're building a relationship. Now you're working together on this. And remember, the goal is to get information out. Above all, that is the goal. The goal is not to make you look bad. The goal is not to ask you terrible questions. The goal is to get information out. That's their goal. So how are you going to, and your goal also will be to get information out, but you want to make sure, of course, it's the information that you know is correct, is accurate, and you want to come across as being very transparent and having empathy and all of that. So that's where your messaging moves into where you're going to put the media, or where you're going to set up if you're doing any type of press conferences or giving them any special access, or the police have blocked everything off. You have to think about that, because that's what they're thinking, and you want to be inside their heads, which is part of what we do with Insider Media Relations.
Well, and I just want to point out, sometimes this wouldn't be a crisis situation, but it's a bit of a crisis for a brand. We were working with one of our clients who had this great, wonderful opening, and we had drones, we had media coverage, we had cameras all over the place. They were going to do this thing. And there were it was under construction. There were 12 porta potties, and like right there. And you cannot move the porta potties. But this is not what we want in the back of every single shot of this exciting day about this, construction happening. So, luckily that day we had the ability to move a great big fire truck in front of it, to just, so everybody still had access to the porta potties. We couldn't move them. Talk about move the stairs, move the truck.
Yeah.
Right. And so we put this fire truck there because, we got there and
things I was thinking about moving at that moment, but I wasn't going to go there.
It's Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. So, it's sometimes, and that would be a comical situation, but that's something that doesn't look great for your brand, because your brand is not porta potties. Your brand is this wonderful building going up. So, it can be that kind of thing too. But thinking about what's that background, what's the media, what's in their shot that they couldn't frame out if they even felt like it, right? Not 12 porta potties, they're right there.
Yeah, chances are they don't want the porta potties in the shot.
Right.
But speaking of the media and, your messaging, you have to determine how you're going to get that information out there. And that's step 4 on this outline. And as all former journalists, we know the number one source that media turns to on social media is going to be Twitter.
Yep.
Every single time. And I think a really great example of getting your message out there is creating a unique and specific hashtag to the situation that you may be trying to get that critical and transparent information out on. As a meteorologist too, one good practice I love that people use in Colorado and really across the Western United States as a whole is when we have a wildfire, there's a specific hashtag for that wildfire. So on Twitter, you're going to be getting correct, accurate information, whether it's evacuations or data about the fire size. For a fact that relevant hashtag and very specific hashtag is going to reach members of the media like myself, who are immediately going to get that out to the public who may not be looking at Twitter or on their phones and may be turning to the media for that critical information.
I think it's also important that the media knows which Twitter account is the official Twitter account. Mm-hmm. We met with some of the officers at the LAPD who were tweeting out information about the shooting at Trader Joe's, which was probably about 3 years ago. As it was happening, they're tweeting to the journalists, and there were a lot of people that were tweeting at them, but the journalists said we knew where the official LAPD Twitter account was, and we understood when they sent something that it was coming from them. So that's why it's so important when you're thinking about crisis that the reporters already tweeted them. They're comfortable with the fact that this is your official site. They may look at the other sites, God knows, but they know that the official information is coming from you because they already know your Twitter handle. And so that's really important to start now as one of those prep things in case you have an issue or a crisis and you want to get information out.
Well, and that's one of the things that we counsel municipalities in particular, but we would counsel any company to think about what kind of content do you have that might be pre-scheduled. So if you have some sort of crisis going on and you're like, hey, it's our 15% off widget sale, and that's going out, that's not a good look. So, if you're in a particular crisis situation, take a look very quickly at what content you might have scheduled up, ready to go, that is sort of set and forget, and make sure that you can put a pause on that immediately. But then you might also think about on all of your social media channels, posting a message to say, hey, monitor our Twitter account for official updates. This Facebook page will not be, you will not receive an update or response from this Facebook page, and we will not be posting official information on the Facebook page. Certainly, I can't imagine an Instagram page being used as the official, source of information. But
there may be a new channel next week for all we know. So it's really important to choose that channel.
Choose the channel and then let people know.
Who knows?
About it.
TikTok could become the channel. Who knows? I mean, we just don't know where it's going to go. So it's more. So you have to be on top of that as far as where are the media going to go. But right now, Twitter is still the place to go.
Yeah. Step 5, Jordan.
All right. So how are you going to determine how you've got this information out there? How are you going to organize that information and update it to the media? Because we know with Twitter, unless you are using that specific hashtag, that if you send a tweet, it's gone in 30 seconds, especially if you have a lot of followers. And these media outlets are obviously following thousands and thousands of different accounts to stay on top of what's happening in their state, world, whatever. So are you going to put out a press release? Are you going to create a Facebook page, an official Facebook page for the event if it's large enough? Will you be emailing people? How are you going to monitor the media to make sure that your message is getting out there? So I think step one here is figuring out, getting all your ducks in a row and saying, okay, the crisis has happened. We've put out real-time updates. Now that things are starting to simmer a little bit, we are going to turn to this medium for all future updates. And then you continue to update that medium. So what is that going to be?
And Sarah, what's the best way to monitor especially from a financial standpoint?
Yeah. So we have just an incredibly robust set of tools, which unsurprisingly come with a robust price tag. So it kind of depends on what your business is and how closely you need to monitor information. But, we use a tool called Meltwater, which can take in basically the entire digital landscape. So broadcast coverage, broadcast TV, radio, digital media coverage, anything published on the internet. It can take in anything on social media. So a full funnel from Twitter. So anything gets said on Twitter, you'll know about it. It's not a sampling. So that's a wonderful tool that we use on behalf of our clients. But if you don't have that kind of, budget to do something, you can also set Google alerts on your phone. What I do recommend is that you set Google alerts and then you also, search those hashtags, Jordan, because what we find with Google alerts is sometimes you get them instantly. Sometimes they pop in like 12 hours later. And sometimes it'll be different depending on which one of us has it set. So what I would say is, if we're monitoring something on behalf of a client, all three of us would set these alerts on our phone. And then sometimes somebody gets it ahead of somebody else. But Google alerts are free. You can use if you use a social media scheduling tool and management tool, so Hootsuite, Sprout, there are lots of other ones. Those are also great tools that you can search. You can put in a search term. You can at least keep an eye on what's being said about your brand. Some of them have a sentiment analysis as well. So you can, get a rough picture of, is this positive? Is it negative? Those are paid tools. So, Google searches, and then like you said, Jordan, just a hashtag search. Like if you're trying to, I'm thinking of that fire that was down in Salida last year, and I can't think of the name of it, but the hashtag was, Salida fire or something like that. So you would put in that hashtag, and you could do that for free, and you would do that manually, however many times a day that you would want to check and see what's being said about that. So there are lots of ways to go about it. And it just kind of depends on what your budget is and what your needs are.
I also like to do a specific Twitter list on my phone of reporters who I know are covering whatever it is that the issue or crisis is, so that I can quickly go to that list and just go through and see what they've done in the last 15, 20 minutes when we're in a crisis. It's another way to keep, so they may not be using your hashtag. This is a way for you to keep on top of what they're tweeting out. And remember, they want people to see what they're tweeting out, so they're not going to hide it. But if you know who's covering you, if you know who's there live, if you know who's called you, keep a list, and then you quickly make a Twitter list. And we, in some of our previous and Move the Stairs chats, as well as in our vlogs, we've talked more about Twitter lists. But I love my Twitter list.
Yeah, we are big Twitter list fans.
I do. I love my Twitter list because, there's so much coming into Twitter that if I know who really matters, and the reporters who are covering you in this scenario really matter, then you have an idea of what's going on with them in real time, which is fantastic. So I just wanted to go through the steps real quick, 1 through 5. Determine your key decision makers, your lead and your sub lead. What is your crisis messaging, where you're going to have that sometimes we call it a Swiss cheese press release, sometimes we call it a dark press release. The bottom line is have something that's written out, already has your boilerplate on the bottom. You just have to fill in the details to get moving. Determine where you're going to manage the media and how you're going to manage the media. And when you get that first call, find out what they know, and then tell them you'll call them back in 15 minutes and take a breath, and then get your stuff together before you call them back. And then determine how you're going to continue working with them. How are you going to disseminate the information? And that means that you have to have a current media list, must have those relationships already. And if possible, this is a great time for you to think of the specific hashtags that just can be tweaked, because it's that tweaking of a plan that makes all the difference. It's the tweaking in the outline. So the outline are the 5 steps, and then the plan is what comes behind. But again, don't get real detailed, because you're not going to have time to read anything when you're going through that.
Yeah,
and lastly,
a handful of pages.
Exactly. Lastly, determine how to update the facts about the crisis, and you want to be fairly quick. So what's your primary social channel? Probably Twitter. You already have your dark releases ready to go, so you're good there. Who do you want to talk to on the phone as opposed to email, or as opposed to an in-person or a Zoom? Sometimes phone is easier, especially if you're in the middle of a big crisis and you've got lots of people trying to get a hold of you. Then you've got one-on-one stuff going on, and that's a lot easier to manage. And then how are you going to monitor what they're saying? That's all in step 5. And how much money do you have for tools? You don't have any money, you do Google Alerts, you do Twitter lists. And if you have a little bit of money, maybe you do Hootsuite. And if you've got a lot of money and you really want to bring everything together, Meltwater, Cision, Sprout, all of these big tools are something that you can look at to see which one of them will work best for you.
Yeah. And so I just want to point out again, you went through that list of 5 steps, right? That's our downloadable. So drop a note, DM, send any one of us an email, and we will get you that 5-step outline that'll just get you started thinking about putting together a plan. So a full plan is going to be different than this outline of like, okay, let me think through the immediate things that I need to get going with. So at 12:46, and I'm astounded that we're like in the ballpark of on time. So remind us what we're talking about next week, because we've got a great discussion coming up next week.
Yeah, next week this is actually going to be really cool because if you look at 2020 and everything that has happened here, specifically culturally, everything that has happened in 2020, we're going to be talking about how you can adapt your plan so that you can continue to move on with your business and your brand, and also adapt with these changes that 2020 has brought us. So that it's a pretty big topic, but I think we're going to do our best to really zero in and make sure that you're going to be on top of those things moving forward.
And I think it's important for you to know, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter. We're going to talk about COVID and the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about things that are touchy.
Right.
How you think about them.
We're getting edgy on a Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be. So we're going to do more of a deep dive into that. And I think that's really, really important.
But these are the things, like you say, these are the things that at the beginning of the year, I think very few businesses would have thought, gosh, I better think through my what I'm saying about that, or what my platform, my stance might be, or do I take a public stance, or do I not say anything? Nobody on January 1 was like, let me make sure that my business stance is in alignment with, my personal politics is in alignment with, this giant cultural change. So that's kind of, an example of how you need to be flexible and how these plans or outlines, whatever you're working with, need to be flexible with whatever happens throughout the year.
Let me give you a little taste of what we're going to talk about. So I was just listening to a podcast with Jennifer Long, who's an unemployment attorney, an employment attorney, and she also is a discrimination complaint investigator. And she was really being questioned about, what if you think you're a really good person and you're doing everything, but maybe you're not, you don't know? And this is what she says. The first tool you need is humility, to let your defenses down, to say, that was my perspective, and I had that, but now my perspective's changing a bit, especially because all of what I'm learning and what I'm hearing, and that now this is what I'm going to do because I've learned something. I'm looking at this a different way. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. Another thing she suggested was to think about, I'm aware of my own deficiencies in this area, and here's what I'm doing to get better. So I acknowledge that walking in someone else's shoes who I've never had their experience is really difficult. And I think this is true across the board, but the fact is right now, really important. Walking in someone else's shoes, and now that I'm hearing more, there's so much more attention to it. I realize there might be some things that I just don't get. And I'm changing a bit here, and this is how I'm trying to get my head around this. So you're acknowledging that your perspective is being broadened somewhat, and you're doing it with humility, and that's key. So those are the types of things that we're going to talk about next week.
Excellent. So Friday afternoon, guys, in the 10 minutes we have left, get out your
ready.
go bag.
You go through the. So Sarah, you're going to do the big list, and then we're going to have our special things we love.
Well, so I'm thinking about, and your go bag is going to depend on who you are and what you're trying to do, and all of these things, right? So if you're working on behalf of clients, your go bag is going to be much bigger and more extensive than if you're working on, in a particular office. So let me give you one example. In our M&C go bag is a small portable generator, and we have used that.
I have it.
It's awesome.
I'm talking small.
So little.
It goes on, literally goes on my shoulder.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
This one happens to be called the River, but we can run 8 different things off this one generator, and it holds a charge for 2 months or something. And it's 20 hours. I can run off this generator for 20 hours after I charge it, which means I plug it in, and I can run stuff I can also recharge it in my car. So that's one of the things that we've used. And I can tell you that if you're outside with reporters and you've got something like this that's going to help them, it's also going to help you get your message out. So that's why you want to think about something like this.
Our Friday chat has gone full QVC here.
Right, yeah, for sure. But you know what?
I think about this actually, but who cares?
But yeah, they're all over. You can find them all
They're
over.
also on Amazon. My girlfriend just bought one for her. She built a cabin, and it has no electricity. And this thing runs her whole cabin.
Wow.
If you're out and you need to be, using your phone to shoot video, you need to be on your laptop. Jordan, you've got all of the camera gear or media's there, and their batteries are dying. Like if you can be like, oh, here, you know what? You can plug in here. Now you're creating a relationship, and you're assisting your media colleagues and helping to create a good relationship. So in the M&C go bag, we've got a generator, which we've used. We've got a small portable microphone, those ones with the box that plugs into the mic. And we have used that a number of times. We have a pop-up tent to provide some shade or protection from rain or snow or whatever. I'm thinking one of crisis management event that we rolled to where we had food. We had like granola bars, stuff that wasn't going to go bad. So it was like granola bars, apples, a couple things to just keep people from getting hungry. Lots of water. Oh my gosh. Bottles of water. We had hand wipes. This was before COVID, but we're prepared anyway, because we had hand wipes, we had paper towels, we had, all of that stuff where you're stuck out in the sticks,
right? And
you're, trying to tell a story, trying to keep the media on message about something. And they're thinking, I need a restroom, and I haven't eaten in 12 hours. And my phone's dying, and my battery's dying, and my news director is screaming at me. So that's the kind of stuff that we have in the M&C go bag.
And we have a that too. Spot. So our hot spot, this goes with me everywhere. So it just kind of sits in my purse, and then I charge it every night, because you never know what you're going to be on the side of the road. You don't know, and people need to be able to get out. Now you're providing a way for them to get their message out. when you do all this, they're like, wow, these
You've
people
thought
know
of
what
everything.
they're doing. Yeah. I mean, they're prepared. What does that give them the feeling of? You're competent. You're on top of it. So when you tell them something, you have more credibility and trust. And that's what all this is about, is building credibility and trust while you're dealing with whatever it is that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. And when you think far enough to bring granola bars or to bring something for them to eat.
Or a clean shirt. We have taken clean shirts.
That's right. Clean shirts go with us as well. So if somebody spills their coffee on them or whatever, here, we got a shirt for you. I know that sounds over and above, but you know what? It's like 3 shirts. It's not a big deal. And it makes all the difference when we're rushing to a scene. The other thing that I would tell you is we have a cart on rollers.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be carrying all this stuff. And, Jordan can only carry so much. No, I'm only kidding.
We make Jordan carry everything.
That's not true, but we have our own cameras.
Oh, no, now he's busting up the scene.
We have our own cameras, so we're shooting our own material that we can also provide to people, which is really important.
Yeah.
And so all of that can go into the cart that's on rollers. It takes the footprint of the cart is like this big and about that tall. And we just unfold it. We can put everything in it and we can roll it with us, kind of like when you go to the beach. So it's that type of thinking ahead that you already know and we know it's all in one place. It's all, we're not, oh my God, where's this? I gotta have this. No, it's all in one place. And there is a list that goes with it. So that if somebody took the hotspot, where is another hotspot so we can throw it in there and we can quickly check off to make sure we have everything we need. Then we are in the car and we're on our way.
And can I tell you, so I have a couple of really low tech things in my bag. Jordan's going to get into some more of the high tech things. Guys, pen and paper. Like, it's not going to run out of battery.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Pen and paper. So if you're standing outside, maybe you're, I don't know, at a wildfire, right? And you're going to be standing outside for who knows how many hours, and your cell phone's going to go down, your battery's going to die, even your backups. So Jordan and I both have battery backups, which saved our bacon about 2 weeks ago, because I was managing, I think, 5 members of the media, and I think you had 5 or 6. And all of them were contacting us by text or cell phone call, and we're managing them. And so, man, we needed that battery backup. But do not forget pen and paper, because at least you can write their number down. You can, get their email. You can, write a note down or write your list of like, got to send this to somebody, or when I get to power, I need to do X, Y, Z. So those are just some of the low tech things. I always, because I'm just that kind of gal, have something to eat. I've got a granola bar in every pocket, and I don't love granola bars, but let me tell you how delicious they are at hour 12 in the cold.
The other thing that Sarah has in her bag that I never thought of until I was with Sarah and I needed them are Band-Aids.
Yes.
I now go nowhere without my Band-Aids.
Yeah.
Because of Sarah, but she does have the Mary Poppins bag. Jordan, you want to get into the bigger stuff?
Yeah. So at M&C, we have all of our own camera gear. So I have that. It's under my bed, ready to go. I just pull it out. It can be in the trunk of my car and on the road within 5 minutes, but batteries are charged. Every time I do a shoot, I offload video clips onto external hard drives so that I know that the cards are freed up just in case, because you never know how much video or interviews or whatever you're going to have to shoot, especially as you're trying to help the media tell the story as well. In times of crisis. So I have that all ready to go. The thumb drive, of course, sits in my laptop bag too. So you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're having a hard time getting, it's great if you have the camera gear, but if you can't get that footage out to the necessary areas, what's the point
you're
of
out of
bringing the
Wi-Fi,
camera gear?
or the hotspot has
Right.
died, or you can't push it through the pipe that's that big, the Wi-Fi, whatever.
Right.
And
You're
we have,
one dot
a
of
set of
5G.
lights, Jordan,
Yeah.
right? We have a full light kit that's in there as well,
Exactly.
because if something happens at night, you're going to need those lights.
Exactly. Yep. The light kit is ready
So
to
we've
go
thought,
too. And in the light kit, I should mention, you've got the two big LED bulbs and an extension cord. And whether you're using the light kit for the extension cord or vice versa, you'll have that extension cord ready to go, which in and of
That you
itself
can
is
put into
pretty
your portable
handy.
generator. You're done.
There you go. Exactly.
yeah, it's so what I want to say about all this is, you know, it may sound like, oh my gosh, that's a whole bunch of stuff. And when would you ever need that? We have used every single item in our to-go kit at, you know, any number multiple times for multiple clients. And we do, Diane, always get that response like, how did you guys think of this?
Right.
Whether it's from our client, from our media colleagues, from, you know, somebody that we're working with on location, they're just like, how
Yep.
did you guys think of that? And just that gives us such credibility in managing a crisis situation and bringing that temperature down so that people feel like, okay, we can handle this. I can get something to eat. I can clean my hands. I can take a note. I can get a charge. I can, you know, whatever. It's going to be okay. Next week, you guys, Jordan, tell us. Now, we've talked about this a little bit, but tell us what we're going into next week.
Yeah, just to recap, and Diane did dive into this a little bit, gave us a little bit of a sneak preview, but with all of the cultural changes we've seen unfold here in 2020, we're going to take a really deep dive into that. And, you know, how do you adapt your plan so that something you may have said 6 months ago may not be necessarily something that you would say today? And I think we have a long history of that. Diane, you mentioned Me Too earlier, the Me Too era and movement. So we have seen these things happen, and 2020 is another year that's presenting that. So we want to make sure you're ready for it.
And the other part of that is we want you to feel comfortable that you can say something if you choose to.
Exactly.
Because I think for so many people, myself included, there are times that I think, oh, just keep your mouth shut. And that's okay sometimes, but there are other times when it really calls for you to have some type of a comment as well. So that's what we want to talk about. How do you do that? How do you do it as carefully, but with as much empathy as possible? And a lot of that is just about saying, I'm learning. And that's a good thing. And that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to have some experts on next week to help us as well.
All right. Well, happy Friday, everyone. We've got you done at 101. So we're a little heavy, the producer in me says, but that's okay. Lots of good stuff today.
Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.